first time ever.
Hear you loud and clearly.
And it was going place.
That stuff's great.
But the game is not a roguelike.
Boomer shooter.
Bang.
Hello, this is John St. John, and you're listening to KEEP In the Keep, bringing you all the hits from the finest in the world of gaming and entertainment. Now sit back and relax as the drowned god Cthulhu lulls your mind with the tastiest talk in town.
Welcome to another chapter of In the Keep podcast. I'm your very own prophet of the drowned god, the Motherlode. The Keep is a collective of gaming enthusiasts compelled by the drowned god Cthulhu to frag and jib one another into oblivion for all eternity. Sometimes people will ask me, like, Motherlode, what's your favorite interview that you've ever done? Or, like, who's your favorite guest? And that is such a difficult, unfair question because I've had an amazing opportunity to form so many lasting relationships, on the show. It's like picking between your children, really, like, who do you love the most? And obviously, some people become closer than others and everything, and I think you guys know who the really close ones are, the recurring guests that we feature over and over and over again. But today's guest is just one of those great people that I truly, truly admire and had a just fantastic time. Like, when you meet someone and they are like you in a different life, this is just a guy who's on a path that I very much see, similar to my own in many ways, just in terms of, philosophies and thought processes and, how our brains work. And, so MK Schmidt is on the show today, and I had a fantastic time. We are promoting his new game, Paradox Vector. If you didn't see it at Realms Deep, it is a really cool retro shooter. And it's got these fantastic graphics that are just going to blow your fucking mind when you take a look at it, vector graphics and everything. But man, what a cool conversation. I can't wait to share it with you. But before I do, music this week is from the original soundtrack to Paradox Vector. It is a amazing procedurally generated track actually made in MK Schmidt's game, which is called Anomalies. And yeah, you got to check that one out too. But let's let the music play, and you'll very soon be in the keep with MK Schmidt. How do you manage to do literally anything at all with 7 children?
I'm married, so my wife, we actually homeschool also, just to add to the chaos. And she does handle the brunt of that, but I do fill in from time to time and do other things with them. It is challenging, for sure. And it helps that I am a freelance artist, so my time is pretty flexible. I get up early in the morning, usually, to get work done as much as possible before they start emerging, and but they're pretty good. I think we have a pretty good routine, and I'll definitely occasionally just have to run upstairs and sort things out from time to time, but it's not so bad. It's not as bad as it sounds. Having more kids, actually, I've noticed they play together a lot. You can kind of leave them alone, and they're fine. They don't need their parents all the time.
Yeah, they police each other.
They do for the most part. But,
how old are they?
Yeah, I mentioned my oldest is 19, so she's attending college, and our youngest is 1.5, and we've got 2 to 3 years between everybody. So they're pretty evenly spaced.
So I too am one of 7.
Oh wow, that's great.
Yeah, I fall somewhere in the middle of the group.
Okay,
it's not like your situation. There's multiple divorces and remarriages involved in this conglomerate of children. But yeah, so I had like an interesting dynamic of being the oldest when I was at home with my mother, but when I would visit my dad, I would be in the square in the middle. So I have 2 younger brothers and an older sister and older brother.
Interesting.
I think what you say is true, that we do police ourselves. Like, you can immediately, when you say, I have 7 kids running around in my house, it sounds like absolute chaos. But as you said, yeah. So how does that, cause you said you're an artist. And when you say, so do you paint? Do you sculpt? What's your medium?
I do a lot of different things, but mainly painting as far as the fine arts are concerned. I did actually attend school for sculpture at first, and I actually went into toy sculpting for a time as a career. And then I started getting into digital and, learning about computers and stuff, which is all pretty much after college. Like, I had a computer, but I didn't do much art on it prior to, 1998 or so. So once I learned about how to manipulate, computer graphics and stuff, I saw the benefit of that, and I saw that's kind of where things were heading professionally. Although I think there's certainly still a need for physical, traditional artists out there. But it wasn't too long before I found out about Game Maker, which was the first game engine I started using back in like 1999 or so. Yeah, but I still do paint. They're usually small, sort of intricate artworks. I haven't done any too recently. I think I finished a couple earlier in the year, but I've been focused on games since then. So it's hard to switch back and forth. But when I'm finished with this game, I'll probably spend a long time not doing games for a while. That happens.
So let's go back to your childhood. What made you an artist?
Well, I'm the middle child of 3, and I think my mom always encouraged me to be an artist. Like, I would draw like a potato, and she'd be like, "Wow, that's amazing! You're the best!" Like, I'm putting it on the fridge, and I'm like, "Hey, this is fun! I can draw potatoes and get all this recognition and attention." So I kept doing it, and I enjoyed it too. I think they talk about nature versus nurture with these things. I think there's a combination that needs to happen. I think a lot of people have an innate sort of skill or joy that they get out of that, and some people probably don't. But then you also need an environment where that's encouraged and sort of at least tolerated, right? Some people will love doing art, but their parents will be against it for whatever reason. So they might not get the chance to really explore it. I was fortunate to have both of those. I enjoyed doing it, and I was encouraged to do it. So here I am.
No, it's funny that you say that it has to be a combination between the two. I 100% agree with you. I grew up around, like, one of my best friends growing up was a like virtuoso oboist. So
Okay.
shout out to Izza if you ever happen to listen to this. But Izza went to a Interlochen. Are you familiar with the school, the art school?
No, I'm not actually.
So last 2 years of high school, Izza spent like a couple of years there, and it was really amazing because when they came back from school, there's all this talk about like amongst high art, students at that time. People would say like, "Oh, you're so talented," and the response was always like, "Talent. Anybody can have talent. You can be born with talent." But when you say like, "Oh, you're very talented at that particular, venue or whatever it is that you do, whether that be sports or art or any idiom medium you choose," people will say that, and to me, it almost, when you say someone is talented and you equate all of their hard work to just that talent, it takes away all of the hard work,
Yeah,
like,
I guess it could be.
Obviously it's intended as a compliment. Like there's no, I'm not going to throw that in someone's face and be like, F you shouldn't say that. But I mean,
Right.
There has to be, both. There has to be the initial predisposition to have an affinity towards pursuing something, and then there has to be the actual pursuit. Otherwise, you won't ever really amount to anything. So, for in your case, you have some artistic talent that your mother fostered, and you have the drive also to still do things though you have a family and other obligations in your life.
Sure. That it's sort of it's not always easy to do that, obviously, but I enjoy the challenge of it and enjoy the outcomes of having produced something like a finished product that I can show people and people can enjoy. So,
having played Paradox Vector and knowing now that you are into the fine arts, I'm assuming you're a fan of MC Escher. Yeah,
and this also goes back to my mom. Very, very young age, she was taking a college course, and the whole course was about one book called Gödel, Escher, Bach, which is it's a very, I've read the book and I still don't know what it's about, to be honest. It's like, it's exploring the mathematical principles between the mathematician Gödel and then the musician Bach, composer, and the artist MC Escher, and how they kind of dealt with similar topics in different ways,
Yeah.
And I would just look through the book and look at the pictures of Escher's artwork back then. And I must have been like 4 or 5 years old. And I was just fascinated because he could make something that was impossible exist, and that was just, I couldn't get my mind around it. And it's always been with me in that way. I've got calendars of his work and books. And I read his book that he wrote about his art, and that was just fascinating. I was really surprised when I read that he didn't really like the 3D impossible geometry art as much as he liked the patterns that he would work on also. Like that was his real passion, was making those interlocking patterns. And I was always a little disappointed by that, like, because I was more into his 3D impossible stuff. But everybody's different, right? But it was always in the back of my mind to make a game using that, and I always assumed it would be 2D, right? Because that seems his work was 2D, and I think when Monument Valley came out, I realized like they did it way better than I could have ever done it. So then I started thinking more 3D, and I was working on this vector art game. And it was just going to be about shooting robots. Very simple, something you could have played in an arcade in the 80s. That was my initial plan. But then the idea to make it sort of impossible and surreal worked into there. And I thought that it would be a neat mixture of two different genres, Yeah. And that's basically what happened.
Well, what's so cool about it, I mean, the non-Euclidean portion of it is very interesting, and it really only like truly becomes apparent in like the last section of the game, like how much has been going on that maybe you haven't noticed all the way along, at least for my playthrough. But it just the game is very impressive just knowing that you made it by yourself with no one's help, you know? Did you have other people that you were like referring to? Do you have an internal group of confidants?
I'm an outsider artist, I think, in that sense. I don't have this community, and it's something I feel like I'm missing out on.
You've got a community living in your house.
Sure. Yeah, my kids, I have to pay them to play my games. They're like, your games are boring, Dad. We like Roblox. They like Roblox. What can I do? Yeah, so I don't have that, unfortunately. I feel like I'm missing out because of that. Recently, I've joined into some game jams, and I think Discord is actually a really great place, actually, for finding people that have similar, interests. And I think it was you that initially invited me to the 3D Realms Deep conference, and that's been an amazing experience, just because there's so many other people working on first-person shooters. A lot of them are solo devs like me, and so I do feel like I found a little bit of a community here, which I didn't have before. I think most of my real-life friends are not game developers. They're not even into playing games, so I don't have a lot of we definitely share interests, but just not this interest. So finding some other people with the same experiences and goals is really good.
Yeah, is when Fred asked me to do this, I didn't really anticipate it, because the initial pitch was just like, hey, let's like find some indie games and like we'll just put all their trailers in the, I think I told you first and foremost, like we're just going to do like B-roll of like the trailers between the actual event and everything. And then it became so much more than that.
Yeah, I was shocked at how much prominence you guys gave to the smaller games. That was great. Sorry to interrupt you.
Never apologize to me. I don't deserve it. But yeah, he said like, just pick games that you think are good, like indie games. And I was like, fuck yeah, like of course. And so I had seen Paradox Vector, I think on Twitter or something like that. And I was just like, I loved the graphical style, and I saw like the non-Euclidean and all this kind of shit. And I had a really good friend who I work with, fellow meteorologist guy, and he's like I'm more of like I draw frontal charts, so I'm like an artist kind of mindset. He's like a mathematician. He he really does, like he sits there and just does fucking algebra for fun all day. And I sent it to him, and I was like, you got to check this game out. It looks like right up your alley. And we were just mind blown by it, and I've had such a great time exploring it. But I actually had not gotten a chance to buy it and play it until we were like well into, like I had already invited you. I was just like, I know that anybody who could put this together and make this look this good has enough substance that I'm not going to worry about it. Which was a bet. Like I flipped a coin on you, and I was right. That's how I feel.
You. I appreciate that.
And but since then I've played literally all of your shit, and it's all amazing.
Thank you so much.
So what got you into the first person shooter genre?
I didn't actually get into them till fairly late. I didn't have a PC. I was a Mac guy up until maybe 2000 or 1998. I think I remember I got my first PC, and it was a potato. So I didn't even think of playing games back then, because games for me were more consoles. We had a Nintendo console back then. But then it was Doom 3, actually. When Doom 3 came out and I saw that, I was like, what the heck? Prior to that, 3D games that I played would be RPGs. We did have a Nintendo, but I also had an Apple II, and I played a lot of RPGs on there. So those were first person in the sense that you could see this 3D maze. Might and Magic was my favorite. Bard's Tale 1 and 2 and 3 were great. And I spent hours and hours, drawing the little maps that you had to draw to know what the heck you were doing. And I remember having dreams back then of like maybe one day there'll be a game that's 3D that you can actually kind of move around in. And maybe it won't just have the same wall texture repeated over and over and over again. Maybe it'll have different textures. And you could slowly see the development of that happening. But then when Doom 3 came, and I was at Micro Center computer store, and I saw they had it on display. I was just like, oh, wow, like this is my dream come true in a way. More of a nightmare in that case, but it was just visually, I couldn't believe it. And I had a computer, and I downloaded the demo, and it was playing at like 15 frames per second. But I was like, no, I want to play this game. I played through the demo at that, and that was actually a very terrifying experience because it was kind of like having a strobe light in the dark with demons.
I
that had its own
playthrough.
Yeah. But I knew I have to upgrade my computer and play this because this is amazing and terrifying. And it really scared me. It still scares me. I think it's still one of the scariest games out there. And then I started going back in time, and I played Quake 2, and that was fantastic. That was like more fun, less scary, and more just action based. Mm-hmm. And Quake 1 eventually, and I loved those older style games just because they didn't have this, I don't know what you'd call it, this heavy-handed approach to storytelling that a lot of the games have now. And growing up with an Atari, there was no storytelling. The game was the story. There was no cutscenes, and we got like an Xbox for our kids, and we played through, I think, Gears of War and Gears of War 2, which were cool games in their own right. But like, I just remember like holding the controller and like, why can't I control my guy? Why do I have to wait for this phone call or whatever it is that they're talking through? I don't care about that. I just want to play. So, I don't want to make games where I like the old school approach where it's just gameplay. And if there's any story, you'll let the game tell the story. I have this sort of built in as a design approach, I think. And that's a challenge too, because if you do want to tell more complex story, you kind of have to figure out a way to do that without breaking the immersion, right? And I think a lot of games don't do that these days. You have to stop, you have to wait, you have to go through this discussion or menu or read all this stuff, and that doesn't appeal to me too much.
It's funny that you kind of joined from Doom 3 because Doom 3 was a very strange approach to that genre period. At the time, it was a huge leap in terms of like what an engine could do and what graphics could look like and everything. Yeah. And unfortunately, it was like overshadowed because it came out sort of in tandem with Half-Life 2.
Right.
And Half-Life was the first game that really did that, like the first person shooter, I should say, that like popularized the idea where you have these like long sections where you can't really do much. And to be fair to Half-Life, at least it even in the not really cutscenes, but the parts where you really can't do much of anything, you still had control of your character. So you can turn the camera, you can walk around, you could pull out a gun and shoot the guy who's talking to you if you really want to or whatever.
And then I loved Half-Life
that was
2,
the beginning of this. Yeah.
I didn't play it till much later though. So yeah, but I think they handled it really well actually in there. You didn't lose control of your character. And I think the story was interesting enough and they kept it, I guess, short enough that it didn't become annoying. I think just keeping, like I said, you can go into more detail and have more interesting stories, but you have to handle it in a way where it's not like game breaking. It never broke the immersion. Like you said, you still had control of your character. So yeah, I think they handled it much better than a lot of games do.
But your philosophy about like I don't want to have this cutscene part. I just want to like
As a solo developer making cutscenes like that, it seems way too time consuming, for me to do alone. I'm sure they had a pretty big team working on Half-Life 2. They could handle those things. They had voice actors. They had all that stuff. So
that philosophy is quite in tune with most of what I've covered. Like it's for my personal belief. I'm not against a short little something or whatever to advance the story, but like in general, like I agree with you 100%. I want to control the character. I want to feel like I'm playing a game the whole time. I don't want to. I want to play games. I don't want to watch movies. I separate the two. If I want to watch a movie, I'll go watch one.
Yeah, I agree. I actually like Doom 3 is actually a pretty good example of where they did break the immersion like that. But they had that, you would the camera would go into the guy's head, and they did it in a creative way. And the cutscenes were not too long. I don't remember them being too long. There was way more gameplay than cutscenes. And that's something you see later, the cutscenes start taking over sometimes. So there's always a balance, right? Yeah. If the gameplay is good enough, I'll sit through the cutscenes. I did with Gears of War. I liked those games. I think we played the first 2 of them. But yeah, it just got annoying at times. But it wasn't like I'm going to turn it off. There were some old school games that were fully focused on gameplay that were much worse, right? I just remember the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles on the Nintendo. There was a point at which I literally...
It's sitting over there. I have that.
I threw the controller at when you're in the hallway with Shredder, and I was just like, no! Can't take it anymore. It became impossible to I never looked back.
That game's worth a lot of money now. Like if you have it, I don't have it in a box, but if you have it in a box, it's like, wow, I can't believe how much people will pay for that.
Interesting.
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is like one of the stupidest ideas that ever happened. Like just the name of it, just right there off the bat.
Right.
Just in general, like just the concept of like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, like let's just throw something at the. I know it's like someone told me it was a metaphor for something really philosophical that I surely don't understand and can't recall right now. But regardless, all named after famous artists, so I guess that's your tie to it.
Yeah. No, I remember when the comic came out, and I wasn't into comics at all. I don't know if this is widespread, but there's an assumption that nerdy or geeky people are into kind of the same types of things, but I was into Dungeons and Dragons very, very deeply, and I didn't have time for comics. Right? I had friends who liked comics, but they generally didn't play role-playing games. They were more into the comics. So there was a divide, at least where I was concerned. Maybe that's not universal. But no, I had friends who got into the comics. They had Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So I kind of saw it emerging as this kind of, it was a very small scale thing in the beginning. And then it got the cartoon, and then the video games. And so, and I think I wasn't really ever into it that deeply. As I said, I didn't get into comics. I didn't watch the show very often. But the game, I did try to win it, and I thought this should be winnable, and I got to that point, and I just remember I could never do it, and I tried it many, many, many times, and it never happened. And I think it was probably one of those things, looking back, where you had to buy a Nintendo Power magazine to know what the heck to do. But I could be wrong about that. Maybe I just wasn't fast enough or something. But I remember throwing the controller.
So when did you decide, like, I'd like to start messing around and creating?
Yourself? Late 90s. I'd always loved playing video games, and I would always have ideas for video games. Mm-hmm. And I remember filling sketchbooks full of my ideas and stuff. Castlevania was a big one back then. I have like whole maps of Castlevania levels and stuff that I just drew on graph paper, with the thought of, hey, maybe one day I'll make something like this. Never really planning on it or intending it, but someone mentioned Game Maker Studio. It wasn't called Big Game Maker Studio; it was just Game Maker back then.
Mm-hmm.
But when I saw that and how easy it was to just drag and drop, your code, like coding to me was a mystery. I had done a little bit of BASIC back in high school, and I understood it, but I never really got into it. But when I saw that dragging and dropping of code, that visually was very easy to comprehend. And after like a tutorial or two, I was like, oh yeah, I'm doing this. And I made a bunch of games, never really finished any, and then 3D Game Studio became the thing for me. I think it was A5 or A6 when I first encountered that. And then I bought the commercial license early 2000s, maybe 2001 or 2. And I haven't looked back. I've tried other engines like Unity, but for whatever reason, C#, I don't get it. I can use it, but I don't want to. Like, I can kind of think in the language I'm using. It's called Light C. I'll know exactly how to do something if I have an idea. Whereas C# seems way too abstract for me. Like, you have to go through all these different levels of accessing objects, and I can just write a variable and change it anywhere.
Yeah.
Which is, I know
I'm very much the same.
It's bad form for programming, but as long as you do that, extra step of making sure it doesn't get screwed up somewhere, and that does happen occasionally. You can really write spaghetti code with Light C, but until something happens to Windows that makes it unplayable, I'm gonna keep using it.
Yeah, I'm very much the same in that once I've learned how to use a specific tool, like even if somebody's like, oh, there's a better way or whatever, I don't even hear them. I'm just like, I know how to use this. Like I can still work with what, I have my workflow down. Like this works for me. So like, why would if it ain't broke, don't fix it. That's my way of looking at it.
Yeah. But you lose out on some things. Like, I can't do anti-aliasing and have certain shaders operating at the same time. Like, they've resolved some problems more recently that DirectX 9 couldn't handle for whatever reason. So, but if you're making old-fashioned looking games, it doesn't really pose a problem so much. It's actually kind of a feature, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting with Paradox Vector, just first of all, like just how it looks and everything, but how you manage to tell the story, just strictly through gameplay and some very subtle text. Yeah. All the way through. And
yeah, that was I wanted to have some story.
I didn't miss anti-aliasing. I wasn't looking for like, oh, why was it, whatever.
Some people do. I added it as an option, but it does darken the game a lot. I'm trying to figure out if I can brighten it up in anti-aliasing mode, because I have shaders that kind of emphasize some of the lines, but they don't work if I have it on anti-alias. So looking for a workaround for that, but I don't know if it will happen. But yeah, the story and the lore that I included, I wanted to make it optional, right? Like, you don't need to read all that stuff. And I made 1 or 2 lines of lore, given at a time, just to give it some kind of background environment. And then there's a few occasions where a little window will pop up and tell you, the story. But it's literally like maybe 5 sentences, max at a time. It's not.
I quite enjoyed it. Like,
okay.
Yeah, like I felt myself, even though it's not, as you said, it's only a couple of sentences here and there. Like, I want to know why are these people, controlled or whatever, I can't even, if you ask me right now to tell you what the story of Paradox Vector was, like, I really don't know. I just felt compelled, and I guess that's what's important.
Yeah, it is important. I think I don't want to downplay the importance of story. Like, it is an important aspect of gameplay. How it's done and how it's introduced is a big factor, though. And I wanted to keep it as easy as possible, but not neglect it at the same time. So
one gameplay aspect that we can't go without addressing is that every single enemy seems to explode and cause damage, which is so like counterintuitive to the way that I play. I'm a big Doom guy, like Doom 2. Yeah, this was a totally different animal enemy wise.
Okay. Oh, I'm interested to hear that. I guess that they do all explode, don't they? Yeah, pretty much.
Yes.
If you're too close to them, they will damage you. It's interesting. Right. Yeah. I did do that. I decided that at some point. I just haven't thought about it much since then. Yeah.
Yeah. If you were to talk to me for long enough, I'm not a critical person. Like I would be a terrible critic. If anybody's listening to this and they think like, oh, they think of me as a critic, you should just get that out of your head right now. I just like things and I talk about things that I like. And if I don't like things, I'll usually have very poor reasoning. It's like, it made me feel not good or something really not well thought out.
Fair enough.
No, but like, I thought that was an interesting thing to have, is like, okay, so all the enemies explode. So you find yourself in these situations where I recall one point in the game where I was standing in I guess it was like a vent shaft or something like that, and I had to drop down to fight one of the larger enemies. Okay. And there's a couple of them in the room. And as I wanted to drop down, I couldn't, because if I landed on the enemy, which was like line sighting me, then I would die because I had like 6 health or something really stupid like this. So it was, the problem solving became much more complicated. It's like, okay, I got to drop grenades down there, but if I was trying to do it with rockets at first, and I kept shooting the ledge with the rocket, killing myself. All right, okay, so it became a very stimulating problem solving thing for me. Yeah, eventually I was able to just hit them with the grenades and then like kind of get them to. There's no getting them to back off, not with the AI you currently have anyway. Right. So it's like I don't know. As I said, I have a very poorly thought out opinion here. It's just I had fun doing it. Okay,
that's good to hear, and I think that goes back to the days of Quake and Doom. Right. Like, they weren't really merciful games, especially Quake. I remember that in particular. Like, it would just, here's like 15 enemies and you have 10 health, and we don't care. You have to figure it out, right? And I'm not saying that's great, but I don't mind. I didn't mind it. I welcomed the challenge, and they let you save the game, as much as you needed to, which was kind of a workaround back then. I tried to. There's generally not areas where you have tons of enemies. There's a few, but not nearly as many as you'll find in most games. I think most first-person shooters. I tried to balance fighting with exploration a little bit more, and sort of like abstract problem solving. And that's sort of the game I like to make, where it's not just about shooting stuff. I enjoy the combat, but I think it may be worth mentioning that like the Stalker games are my favorite.
Yeah.
Probably my favorite of all time. And that was a lot of quiet exploration, with punctuated by these very intense firefights. And I just loved that, the surprise of it, right? And I think Doom 3 did it well right in the beginning, where you had that long intro where you're just walking through the base and suddenly the demons show up. And that kind of transition from quiet to hectic, I think it's a nice thing to have. If it's constant fighting, I can enjoy a game like that, but not as much when there's some exploration and time to reflect, I guess.
No, generally speaking, like because I got into this genre more from the like multiplayer PvP scene.
Okay.
And like it's only within the past couple of years that I've really like delved into the like single player aspect of it.
I see.
And I've grown to really like it. But I talk to people all the time who, you know, have played a million times. They've played, you know, Doom and Quake and all of the games that we're discussing here. And I notice in other people that they have this very strong sense of, you know, pattern recognition. And they can like, oh, well, it's really easy to fight the enemies because you can notice that they do things in a certain way and all that. And for a reason, I seem to struggle with that. And I'm really good at thinking like a human being. Like that's what I've noticed. Like I can put myself in the head of another person and predict what they're going to do. But with enemies, you know, AI just doesn't, for whatever reason, melt into my brain. With Paradox Vector in particular, the enemies don't feel like this like force that I have to like fight necessarily. They feel more like part of the puzzle, with the exception of the factory level, which we can talk about later. But they just feel like, okay, this is another obstacle in the puzzle that I have to figure out how to deal with. Less so than it is like my brain doesn't go into like fight or flight mode when I meet one.
Oh, okay.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting observation because, I wouldn't say I'm a tremendous AI, you know, enthusiast, or that's not my strength, I suppose.
Right.
I can manage some things, but yeah, there's games where the AI is much more intricate and they have multiple different. And I kind of did that in Star Explorers, my other game, where I had different states.
Trust me, we are going to talk about Star Explorers.
Oh, okay, sure.
I got to sell your current game first.
Yeah, but I did recently add new drones that have a little more.
These are the tentacle ones?
No, these are the green. They used to look like Daleks from Doctor Who. They look like big trash cans that drove around. They now have little legs and a little round head with an eye. And if they spot you, they will fire at you now, and then they'll backtrack a bit to go behind a corner or something. So they, you know, they're kind of dodging you now. They're not just going on their
robots.
Their path. Yeah. They're a little more intelligent, more interactive, and they're a little harder to kill now. So I'm hoping that people appreciate that more. I don't know if the combat is the selling feature of this game. I tried to make it fun, but I have limits as a programmer, of course, that I meet up with. But the newer ones are a little more interesting, I think.
I don't know.
I'm thinking about Doom 2016 now.
Yeah.
For some reason, that was all about the fighting, right? It was just like these big environments were almost more like arenas than anything else, and you just had this big arena fight, right?
That's Hugo Martin. He's the lead designer on those games, and that's like that seems to be his, I'll say, forte. Because Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal, especially Doom Eternal, are entirely based around combat. But as I was kind of saying earlier about Paradox Vector, it's like you have this idea of like, okay, exploration's important and all that. They are especially Doom Eternal, man. I can't say it enough. Is like totally centered around. It doesn't feel to me like combat in the sense that like I'm a guy walking around with a gun who's going to shoot some enemies. It's like the combat itself is the puzzle. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I sensed that in 2016 Doom. I haven't played Eternal.
Do play it. Yeah, I'm interested to hear what you say.
I'll have to buy it first, and that may be some time coming. But I liked 2016, but I didn't love it. It wasn't like, to me, I liked Doom 3 better because of that mechanic where you had to, like, you know, interact with those computers and figure out which combination of how to open the safes. I like that kind of exploration and figuring out puzzle solving. stuff. The combat was fun in Doom 2016, but it felt fun. It didn't feel like a horror game, right? It was more just combat. I didn't feel scared at any time during that game, and I kind of liked that sense of, oh my god, what's going to happen? In Doom 2016, you knew what was going to happen. There was going to be a bunch of demons. You're going to fight them. Like, there was no mystery. But it was very well done. Very well done. And I think the combat in there, it's definitely good combat, like solid combat. And I think as a game designer, I can learn from that for sure. But I would always want to balance it with that sense of exploration.
Yeah, I think that Doom 2016 is about as close to perfect as like a first person shooter's combat in this kind of genre could be.
Yeah.
With the balance of, like, you know, the melee and the glory kills, and then also the actual. I'm a big fan of Doom 2016.
Yeah.
When you do get around to playing Doom Eternal, I'm really interested in hearing your perspective on it, because it's like totally reinvented the wheel in terms of how combat works. There's an intuitive part of the brain. I think this may be my grounding in realism, because, you know, though these games are totally unrealistic in many other aspects, like, I expect that when I shoot a rocket, it does a certain amount of damage, and that a person or a thing being shot by a rocket will react in a certain way.
Sure.
Doom Eternal is all about like ammo management and approach, I guess.
Okay.
So you can't really make those types of predictions as well. It's more about, like, as I said, solving a combat-based puzzle.
Interesting.
While moving very quickly. Yeah.
I think there's a time for those intense moments, but for me, it's just not the whole game. Like, I need to have some quiet time, my me time. You know, like I remember in Stalker, I would just go around taking pictures of stuff. You know, taking screenshots, and just like, wow, that sunset is beautiful. Like, I need to capture that, and wow, look at the way the light is going into that old factory, whatever. And there were also times when I was kind of like, I felt like I lived in that place, you know, like, oh, I have to go get some food because I'm hungry. You know, they just left out the bathroom, thankfully.
Yeah,
I don't think that's become. Yeah, I think some of the mods added sleeping, which I played a bunch of those. But I just remember, like, moments where I would be out in the rain, and I could see like one of those big chimera enemies. They were like very dangerous mutants, but I saw them like way in the distance, and I had my sights on them. I was like, yeah, no, I'm just gonna stand here and watch this guy, see what he does. You know, because there was an interesting AI aspect to that game too. It wasn't just about fighting enemies. Sometimes you'd see them fighting each other, and you didn't get involved, right? It was more of a world building type thing, and I don't think I've experienced that in any other game where I just felt like I kind of lived in this place, you know. That was very interesting to me. I don't think Paradox Vector does that. That was supposed to be, like I said, it was supposed to be kind of an arcade game. It got a little more than that, but it doesn't have that world building sense as much. Considering
how, I mean, objectively, this is not an opinion. This is like, Stalker Shadows of Chernobyl is one of like the jankiest games ever. Like, it has so many glaring issues, and yet it's like you're like probably number 5 or 6, like so many designers who find themselves in this, you know, on this podcast, like disproportionately say Stalker is my favorite game ever. Like David Szymanski from Dusk, that's his favorite game for sure. And there's a few other, they're not all coming to my head right now, but like I've had so many people sit here and tell me like, just there's something about the atmosphere of this game that makes it their favorite game ever, which is to me beautiful because as I said earlier, I'm not a very critical person. It's very much about feeling to me. And there are games that I love, like that other people are like, oh, that game sucks because of this, and that reason. I'm like, well, it doesn't mean it was really good at what it was trying to accomplish.
Right.
You know?
Right. Yeah.
That's
and
I'm
Stalker definitely had the bugs you're talking about. And I think
Yeah.
if you were, I played through it, bugs and all, but then I found out, there's modders out there who fixed 99% of those. So I played through it again. And I think there's still strengths that the original version had that some of the mods lost, especially some of the balancing of the weapons and stuff. But I think it was, like you said, the atmosphere of that game, I think, is the big draw. It's not the combat. The combat is good, but that's not its main strength. It's about exploring and atmosphere. And I think the thing that really got me first time I played it, actually the first time I played it for like 20 minutes. I was like, oh, this is interesting kind of RPG first-person shooter. But then Left 4 Dead came out. And that absorbed me for about a good month and a half. Like, that's all I played. But then I remember going back and going, okay, let me try that Stalker again. Almost didn't play it again, right? And I just remember exploring this old farmhouse and pulling out my flashlight, and just the way the flashlight worked and how it kind of cast shadows, it hit me like, wow, this is actually a very realistic sort of rendering thing. And then the night time came, right? And I was like, okay, there's a day and night cycle happening here. I'm not just playing a game anymore. I'm in a world. And then the next day came, and it was sunny, right? The first day of playing that game, it's cloudy. I don't know if it's always like that, but for me, it was cloudy. So none of the lighting and shadows and all the things that make it beautiful were apparent on that first day. The second day, it was sunny, and it was like shadows are being, and you saw the shadows move as the sun moved through the sky. It was just, wow, I was blown away by that. And I'd never seen that before. And that was one of the things, as we're going to talk about Star Explorers, I was like, I need that in my game. That has to happen. But just the way they set up that environment and the atmosphere, and then the rainy days and sunny days and those lightning storms and the blowouts that they added in the second and third games. Just an amazing kind of variety of things that could kill you. But once you knew what to look for, you knew how to protect yourself. So it was almost like this organic learning about that environment that happened, that it was working on many different levels that most games, even if they look amazing and they have amazing combat, they don't work on all those levels, and that's like the example of Doom, or like I played one of the Call of Duty games once. I couldn't get too far in it. It just didn't speak to me in that same way. It was just like, follow these orders. And I know as far as mechanics and probably programming and stability, it's a better built game from that technical aspect. And I understand why people want that experience of playing a game and it not crashing, And so, but sometimes the experiment, the audacious sort of, audacious isn't the word I'm looking for, the ambitious project is more interesting as a designer and as a player for me. And Stalker tried to do things. It didn't succeed everywhere, but it tried to do things that I think nobody had done before. And that's what made it stand out.
I mean, ideally, you have both, right?
Of course.
In an ideal dev team, you have like a Steve
Stalker
Jobs
2.
And a Steve Wozniak. You have like a John Romero and a John Carmack. You have one guy who can really execute in terms of like the engine part of it and like making it like all the programming work seamlessly, and then you have another guy who can really make a compelling game,
right?
From an artistic and ambition standpoint. But if you remove the art and just have the a plain old awesome beautiful game engine, and try to sell that to me, I couldn't be less interested. but I could name like a squintillion games, or just for anything, artistic endeavor, whatever, where they don't have the technical prowess, but they do have the art and the ambition, and it's so compelling that I can ignore the bad parts of it. Like the Evil Dead comes to mind. Like maybe they didn't have the budget, maybe they didn't have like the best cinematography team in the world, but I could tell they really cared.
Yeah.
And it made one of my favorite movies ever.
Yeah, I loved Evil Dead 2 when it came out. I didn't know about the first one until later, but man, I saw it in the theater, and I saw it with a friend, and I was expecting a horror movie, which I got, but I never laughed so much in my life. Like it was hysterical, and I don't know. That's a hard balance to draw. Like things can be funny, and things can be violent, and it's very rare when they're made in such a way that they can be both.
Yeah.
A lot of times they overstep one or the other, and it goes too far in one way or the other, and it doesn't work. But they just like, wow, they got it right on that one. The scene that like made me realize at first, like, oh, this is actually a very funny movie, is when he goes into the basement and he starts walking backwards into the, like, I don't know what the heck he was thinking. Like, what? Why would you walk backwards if you're looking for monsters? Like,
yeah,
it's so dumb, but it's impossible to explain why I thought that was so funny. I couldn't stop giggling at that point.
I mean, I just watched The Disaster Artist. Have you ever seen that film?
I have not. No.
So it is essentially a biopic of the people behind the movie The Room, which was objectively, like most people say, like worst movie of all. Like Troll 2 is probably another one, but like one of the worst movies ever made, and yet it's a huge hit because exactly what we were just talking about, like how it's so bad that you can't not laugh at it.
Okay.
And it's charming because it's a movie where, Tommy Wiseau, the guy who made it, had essentially no real talent. He wanted to be an actor, he wanted to be a director, but he was bad. But with enough money and enough passion and ambition, he did make a movie, and it is hilarious. Like, not intentionally maybe, but like it's, you can't ignore that. And if you had, I can name a million movies for you, like every Michael Bay movie that are just soulless, like perfect cinematography, perfect 3D graphics, perfect, good actors, everything all the way down the line, but just they don't have that sense of like soul to them.
I agree. Yeah. That's a hard thing to muster up, right? That's art, I think, in its core, and it's almost indefinable. Like what made it that way, And I totally agree with you as far as Michael Bay, and he's not the only one. I mean, he's a guy, he's doing his job, he's doing a good job. People watch the movies, they love them. Like, there's no shortage of money coming out of those pictures. But from my perspective, I could barely watch Transformers, or I think my brother-in-law dragged me out to Transformers 2, and I was just like, oh, why did I come here? Yeah. And I liked Transformers growing up, but it's one of those things, like they tried to make it appeal to an adult audience, but it's a kid's, it's really a kid's movie in the sense that this is about transforming robots. And maybe some people liked that, but I just felt like that was a big miss. Like they're appealing to two parts of my brain that are not meant to be accessed at the same time. So, yeah.
So let's talk about to me, I've played all of your games. I've played Rocket Blasters, I played Paradox Vector. I even played Anomalies, but I didn't really understand what I was supposed to do.
Sure. But
Star Explorers is the best $5 I've spent in years. Wow. And I mean,
thank you.
That was such an amazing experience, dude. I would be absolutely disappointed to have gone through my life, not played that game, and then find out on my deathbed that you should have done that.
Wow. No, that's actually very meaningful for me. I feel like that's been my passion project for many years now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's still at the top of my mind, and I have to force myself not to work on it because I have another game I have to finish. But I write down all my ideas, and I have sketches and things of what I plan to do with it. And let me talk about its origin, because I think that's for me, that's like such an important part of it. And it's kind of, it got lost because of the fact that a game like No Man's Sky came out right before my game came out. And I started it in 2013. And I literally thought like I invented this genre, right? And it turns out I didn't. There was Elite, which was a procedurally generated space exploration game. There was Noctis, which was a procedurally generated space exploration game. I didn't know about those, and I didn't know about No Man's Sky. So when that was announced, it was like, wow, like I didn't think anything of any idea that they stole the idea from me or anything like that. But I knew as soon as my game came out, people would think, oh, he's cloning No Man's Sky. So it was like a thorn in my side, even though I ended up playing that game and enjoyed it. But yeah, so there's no way to remove that from reality now, right? Do you know of a way? Anyway, yeah, that's the reality of it. I had the idea, I started working on it. No Man's Sky came out, and I was like, they got my idea first. What can you do? But I had a choice to make then. I was like, my initial reaction was like, okay, I'll stop making my game. Then I thought about it. I was like, I'm enjoying this. I enjoyed working on it. I was having ideas, putting them into action and seeing the result and enjoying that process. No, you know what? As long as I enjoy making this, I'm going to keep doing it. And 4 years later, I released it on Steam. It got approved when Greenlight was still alive. So, yeah. And then it was a terrible, terrible, terrible game back then. And I feel bad for the people who played it in the early access stage, because it had like major bugs. Like you'd play it for a while, and then for whatever reason, like, your whole galaxy map stopped working properly. And yeah, I felt really bad because a solo dev making a procedural space generation game. Yeah, but I fixed those bugs mostly.
It's one of those things where, as I play through it, I always have in my mind that one man had a dream and made this game. And it's atmospherically so perfect for me. I don't know about other people listen to this. If you form your own opinions, but for me, is I was totally compelled by this game. As you know, while I was playing it, I had to stop and go on a vacation. I had taken, leave from work. I took my wife to the mountains, and I was I didn't take my computer or anything with me. And I was like, I have to know what happens.
Wow. I mean, the mountains are beautiful. The mountains we go there quite often in Colorado.
But they're nothing compared to outer space.
Well, it was my attempt to take the ideas and atmosphere of Stalker and put it in a space game. And it actually kind of came out of 3 different things. Minecraft, believe it or not. Minecraft, for me, I played it for very intensely for 2 weeks. And I loved it for those 2 weeks. And it just introduced me to that idea of you can procedurally generate a landscape, right?
Yeah.
That was super intriguing. I'm sure other games have done it, but that was my first real introduction to that idea. And then I remember at the time I was watching all the Star Trek episodes on Netflix, because I grew up with Star Trek. I loved Star Trek, but I never really sat down and consistently watched through the whole series. And I did them all. I did Next Generation, I'd never watched Deep Space Nine before, but I watched that whole one. I watched Voyager. Then I went and actually watched the original series. And then I started Next Generation again because, you can't get enough of that.
What's your favorite one? Is Next Generation?
I think so. Yeah. Characters and setting and everything. I did also watch Enterprise, which wasn't as bad as my initial reaction to it, but yeah, it's not my favorite.
I'm personally animated series. That's my favorite Star Trek.
The old one?
Yeah.
Oh wow. Okay. Yeah, I didn't.
1970s Star Trek animated series.
How many seasons of that were there?
I think there's like only a couple, but it's like it's the same characters and many of the same voice actors as the original series. But because it's animated, they're not limited by scenery.
Interesting. Yeah. I remember it when it was out back. I was born in 1972, so I do remember the Star Trek cartoon. Just I don't remember anything about it, like episode wise. And I don't think I watched more than a couple times, to be honest. But yeah, is that around? Can you get that these days?
I think I watched it on Netflix. I could be wrong here, but I'm sure you could grab it for a few bucks somewhere, Amazon or something like that. But
I'll check it out. Yeah, but Star Trek, Minecraft, Stalker were kind of the triangle of my existence at that time, and that's where Star Explorers was born, right? Like if I can procedurally generate different planet, right, and then they can all have that day and night cycle and kind of different sort of features that you have to explore and navigate. So working with different levels, like in Stalker, it's not just going to be about combat. There will be combat, and maybe there's not enough. I don't know, but I think people like it where it is combat-wise. I don't think anyone complained that there's not enough.
I do.
But, okay. Yeah, and it's just figuring out how to do that was the challenge back then. But once I got like a working version of the planet generator, I was like, okay, yeah, this could happen. This could actually be a thing. And I just remember the hardest part was getting a database to work, where when you visit a star, when you scan it, it enters it into the ship's database, right? Mm-hmm. But before that, there's nothing. Like there's an empty square, and then once you visit each star, they populate that 3D map. And getting that to work, it was such an abstract thing because I'm an artist, I'm a visual guy, and this was all abstract. This is all like I wasn't producing a visual. Actually, the 3D map came later, and that actually helped me because it was visual. Before it was going to be just text, right? Mm-hmm. You have a list of sectors, and then you click on that, and then you'll have a list of stars, and then you click on a star, and you'll have the list of planets. So it was just a database, and just getting that to work was the hardest my brain has ever worked. And I still don't know why that is. That's like it's not a visual thing. I think it's just putting information in a database. Doesn't seem like it should be hard, but it was.
There are like three particular kind of pillars of this game that really just make it for me.
Sure.
The first one is the survival aspect, and that you have to like manage resources and because I was very dangerously close to just running out of fuel and dying.
Right.
And I just happened on some Ignexium crystals at that point, and so I survived.
You were lucky.
That part of it, because but that part of it was so I don't know, just interesting to me. And then because I usually don't play games like that, right? Like I usually play like games like Doom, where I'm just gonna run in here and fucking shoot everything and come whatever may. And then second pillar for me is the wonderfully pornographic voice acting.
Okay.
I had a fantastic time. I was streaming the game just for some friends, and we were all, really into it. And I got onto a planet because I found out pretty quickly, like, I don't have to have any of these suit upgrades. I'm just going to land on that planet, and I'll run back to the ship when I need to heal. And which is hilarious. But you have the guy, and he's just like, oh, it's so hot. Oh, I really shouldn't be here. And we were having the best time.
Okay.
It's like, I really gotta go. And I love that aspect of it too.
No, I appreciate that. I was intentionally trying to sound like I was an overacting, like character, kind of Captain Kirk-ish. I hope it didn't come across as obscene in any way, but I suppose
no, it's just hilarious.
You could read it that way.
It's charming. It's what it is. Like,
appreciate that. No,
you show it to a bunch of 20-year-old men, they're gonna say porn. You show it to a kid, they're gonna think it's just cool. Like, it's fine. It's like the Shakespeare or The Simpsons. Like,
sure, yeah. No, I appreciate that. Yeah, that came actually kind of later in the development, where I wanted to add something that just personalized it a bit, right? I apologize for my voice acting. Lack of voice
I
acting.
think it's great. I literally love it.
I was also the computer voice originally, but I hired a voice actress to do the computer, just because it became a little obnoxious to hear me all the time, right? It was hurting my ears. Yeah, she did. She was great.
You paid her for 2 lines?
No, there's a bunch of lines.
So there's a warning: planet contains surface hazards.
Yeah.
Proceed with caution.
Yeah.
And then there's, proceed to the docking
hangar bay.
If I'm not mistaken.
There's solar engines engaged. Warp engines engaged. There's a bunch of different things. Fuel level is low, right?
I'm following now.
15, 20 different things, I think, that she says, depending on the circumstances. Maybe 15 would be the max. I don't have the number on the top of my head. Was that the second pillar? I want to hear the third pillar.
The third pillar, which is the polar opposite of the, as I said, pornographic sounding voice acting.
Oh, okay.
The polar opposite of that is the loading screens are like so inspiring.
Interesting.
I loved your it says a lot about you, like what these quotes read,
Okay.
Like I can tell that from going through the each of those loading screens, and I was excited to see each new one, that how well read you are and how much thought you really put into it and how much it meant to you. I don't know. I felt they made me feel connected to you as an artist, and it's really, there's so many good ones in there. There's Dr. Spock, I believe, is in one of them, and there's Carl Sagan. There's so many people that I admire growing up, because I was a huge science nerd when I was a kid, and not from like I'm gonna go learn how to do physics and math and shit, but just like I'm bewildered by it. And Neil Tyson's remake of Cosmos was such a big part of me, and I just loved it, man. And even some that I had never heard of. You had Socrates in there. It's beautiful.
I wanted to get the widest variety of quotes that I could get about space, about exploration. One of the... I just happen to have this sitting here.
Isaac Asimov. Yeah.
He's an amazing guy. I encountered like 15 of his nonfiction books. It's like collections of his articles at the used bookstore. And this was after I had started Star Explorers. Like, this is maybe 2015. And I bought them all up. I was just like, I want to read these. And I started reading them. I was like blown away by his ability to explain space and the science behind these discoveries and stuff in a way that me, as a non-scientists can appreciate and understand. And I think his books gave me the inspiration. Like, I want to put some quotes in these loading screens because, loading screens, they're not our favorite things generally.
Well, but that's the thing is that if you have to have a loading screen, there's the loading screen that's just like a decal, or a picture, and then like loading. And then there's one that sends me on this like path of thought that like I want to continue to complete before I have to get back to the game,
Yeah. So it's
so simple, very simple.
Yeah, I appreciate that. One of my things, I'm a spiritual person. I believe in the existence of God. But I'm also deeply into science. I don't think they have to contradict each other. I think there's a way to understand science and there's a way to understand religion that is, congruent. And that's sort of maybe a deeper passion of mine than that. My art is a way of exploring, and this game is sort of that in a nutshell. And the quotes I chose, you'll see there's some from religious scriptures, different ones. There's like the Bhagavad Gita.
I really enjoyed the Psalms and a lot of that stuff. You're on the same path as me, but you're much smarter and 20 years older. That's.
I hope. I'm surprised that you mentioned the loading screen. So I thought you were talking about the pictures, but the quotes, I did put a lot of thought into it. I'm surprised anyone actually reads them, and that makes me very happy because it was fun to find those. A lot of them, like you said, I'm very well read. A lot of that was just me Googling, stuff, which I guess there's a skill and art to Googling, right? Got to know what to look for.
To me, well-read does not imply that you read a lot of books necessarily. It means that you put a lot of thought into things. I don't know why. Maybe I should pick a different phrase for that, but that's what I meant. Like, a phrase like I'm very into mythology myself and religious scripture, and just not from any particular background, just that I'm interested in how knowledge is passed down through generations, and I think that's sort of something that's kind of lost on my and especially the immediately following generation in terms of like respect for wisdom. And so that's been my, like, over the past little while, like my huge obsession. And phrases like a simple phrase like the earth is too fragile a basket for the human race to keep all of its eggs in, right? Is so perfectly cryptic.
Yeah.
You mentioned Asimov, and like have you ever read he had a short story called shit. It ends with "Let there be light." I can't remember the name of it.
Oh, interesting. I haven't
Asimov.
read deeply.
The last question.
It's called The Last Question?
Yep.
I'm not familiar with it. Yeah.
You are about to receive it. Don't worry.
Oh, thank you.
He was a genius at mixing science and mythology, right? Like,
right.
And this particular short story, I don't want to spoil it. I've already told you what the ending is, unfortunately.
I look forward to it.
It's the journey. It's not the destination. Oh, yeah. It's in your inbox now. And
awesome. I will check it out.
Tells basically like from now to, or, now when he was writing it to the end of time in a few pages. Like I think it's 18 pages or something like that. It's nothing too complicated, but through the art of mythology, through the art of like, not, instead of mulling on details, you give an idea that is meant to be read several times and interpreted.
Right.
This is what we get with the poetic Eddas, right? These are they read like stories. Like, okay, Thor did this thing, or Loki did this thing, and you could read it very literally, and that's one way to look at it. But if you actually look deeper into it, these are all fairy tales work the same way. There's a lesson to be told here that has nothing to do with what you're actually reading. And much of what the poetic Eddas are about is essentially a fertility cult, right? Like
Oh, okay.
how to make a baby. Here's how, but without spelling it out for you, we're going to give you something that it will, make it a
Right.
little more dressed and pass it over from generation to generation. And I look at most like not just spiritual stuff, but just like most older stories in the same way. Like, I look at the Legend of King Arthur in a very similar way.
Okay. Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I went on a whole fucking tangent there.
No, it's interesting.
Yeah.
I love exploring literature and discussing it in general. I haven't read a lot of Asimov, his fiction. I think I've read more of his nonfiction at this point. But what I have read is actually really, really good. I'm reading through the Lucky Star series, which are kind of like pulp novels.
Perfect.
Yeah, which is great. And he wrote them under the name Paul French. And they're just about this guy. He's on the science council and he problem solves around the solar system. So there's one on Venus and there's one on Mars and there's one in the asteroids. They're really fun. But and then his robots, of course, he's I think most famous for. I think he coined the phrase robotics. If I remember correctly.
Right.
So that's pretty.
This comes from the Polish word for slave, I believe, right?
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah. Robot. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. So he always fascinated me, and he's got so much, so much work out there that it's almost like I tend to buy books used. So when I encounter one, I'll buy it, but I generally don't just go order a whole bunch of books at the same time. I like to come across them.
I totally understand. Yeah.
Yeah.
Same. I don't want people to like give me a list of things that I have to like hold to. I just want to go on the journey of life and find what I find on the way.
I put in a few Lovecraft quotes in there. I don't know if you saw those.
Trust me, I saw them all.
Yeah. He's always an interesting guy to enjoy.
We're big fans of Lovecraft here.
I kind of figured. So interesting character, but and I like his sort of take on the universe as this kind of cold, unforgiving place. Right? It's not even unforgiving. It's like doesn't care at all about humans, right? And it seems negative, but I don't read it that way. I kind of read it like you make your own existence here, right? You have to forge your own existence here as much as you can. And I don't think that's incongruent with belief in a divine, right, power either. It's sort of I see it as a test. Like we're here, we have this universe, we can do what we want here. We can get caught up on Earth and get all into our problems and end up blowing each other up. That could happen. Or we can kind of learn to live together and come together and decide, hey, there's a whole universe out there. Why don't we see what else is out there? Like we kind of have to do that collectively as a human race, I think. And that's, to me, like, that's a test for us as a species, in a way.
Yeah.
Right? It's not just an individual issue at that point. We kind of have to collectively decide, let's enjoy this existence rather than murdering each other over it.
This actually reminds me of something from the King Arthur mythos.
Yeah.
Enough. And in T.H. White's The Once and Future King, right? I think it's like the third to last chapter of The Sword and the Stone.
Okay.
Merlin is finishing educating King Arthur, like in a formal sense, and he sends him. He said, "I want you to go talk to the wisest animal that I know, which is the badger." And so he turns him into a badger and sends him to the woods. And I'm going to summarize it and not dull you with the details, but he goes and talks to Mr. Badger, who, and all Badger has to tell him is like, I've wrote a dissertation for my doctorate about why man is the king of the animals, right? And the story essentially boils down to, in the 7 days, God had to make the earth. He basically, he makes all the animals and he tells them, okay, we're going to take a couple of days here and each of you gets to choose a trait. So if you want to change part of your body to be like a shovel so you can be really good at digging, or if you want to have a different mouth that you could be really good at, eating or pecking or whatever. And it's like several, I think it's, forgive me if I'm misquoting the Bible here, but like 5th and 6th days he spends doing this. Okay. And then man is the last animal to choose, and all the other animals have chosen their traits. This could be interpreted one of two ways, or probably many different ways. But like you could go with the evolutionary. This is a metaphor for evolution, which I like. Or you could say like literally this happened. Right. God created all the animals in 2 days. Fine. Either way, however you get to the point of this story is fine. And then man is the last to choose. So man says, I choose not to change myself because I want to exist as you created me. You created me in your image, and why would I want to change that, right?
Interesting.
And God says, congratulations, all you other animals. Man has passed the test, and he will have domain. He will remain this fleshy, vulnerable creature, but because of that, he will have the ability to create as I do, and and create tools and manipulate the environment, and that is our talent. That's why we're on top. Man, I'm just saying, sorry, animals, but we're winning right now.
Well, unless we extinguish each other in the process, which is that freedom that we have, the minds that we were endowed with, it's Spider-Man. It's with great power comes great responsibility, ultimately.
Correct.
Right? We can achieve a lot, or we could end up literally blowing up our whole planet. It's kind of a double-edged sword. So.
Well, the same minds that are doing things like that, the same animal, the same species that are doing these, heinous, destructive things. Yeah. On the other end of that spectrum, there's people like yourself who are saying like, maybe we should go to outer space, and we should, because it's about survival. It's not about like being perfect. It's about like, if we expand to other, planets and other solar systems and galaxies and such forth, then we will ensure the progeny of the human race.
Yeah, I think Elon Musk, I have a quote from him talking about, I think you said it better though, the putting all our eggs in one basket thing. That was that Carl Sagan, I think?
I don't remember. It's one of your quotes from your game.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, I don't remember who said it though. But that's the idea. Like, yeah, we're all on one rock. There's so many other rocks, right? They're not all as hospitable, but if we worked together to get further, we might find other hospitable places. Mm-hmm. I feel like on the one hand, this is fantasy, right? And it's wishful thinking, but literally we could go there if we put our efforts into it. It might take a few years, maybe a couple of lifetimes, but we could get to Alpha Centauri, physically right now if we put it together. Financially,
you just had enough Ignexium crystals.
Right. You need those. Financially, I think the challenge is like one country probably couldn't do it by itself. Mm-hmm. I think the whole world would kind of have to get on board with that and say, let's put some resources into this collectively, and then we might actually achieve it. But that takes a decision, right? That takes a will.
I have no doubt in my mind that the collective human consciousness is capable of engineering our way out of any problem.
Yeah.
When we are threatened. So
Right.
when everyone feels threatened. So like in a few years when, you know, the whole sky is orange like it is in California right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
When the whole world is like that, people are going to get really serious about we need to get off this planet. It's not going to work. And it won't be everyone, sorry, but like a few, an elite few will definitely solve the issue for themselves.
Yeah.
And hopefully that leads to the transpermia of the human race.
That would be
I'm
nice.
drinking beer. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I'm on a different level here, but yeah, this has been an amazing conversation. I'm like truly
very
honored
glad you
to have
invited-
gotten to speak with you.
Thank you for having me on the show. Is it a show? Episode?
It's whatever you want it to be, man. It's just the keep.
Yeah.
People always ask me like, is there a plan to this, or like, you know, how did you get it? All by accident? I'm not an audio engineer. I'm just a guy who found himself with a really great group of people and was obsessed enough with a particular part of video games that I started talking to people, and I found them so interesting that now I'm here talking to you, and it's been an amazing journey.
Yeah. I'm glad you are having this journey, and I'm playing a part in it.
I look forward to talking to you again in the future for whatever it is that you do, man. I enjoy all of your stuff, even Anomalies, though I don't understand what I'm supposed to do with it. There's like a demo out on the Steam page that kind of talks you through the menu and stuff. If you ever feel like exploring that a little further, but it doesn't really have a point. It was an experimental project. It actually was another thing that came out of Star Explorers, where I was trying to get the nebulas to form in a random looking way, and I didn't want to totally destroy my game by experimenting too much with it, so I made a separate program to try to do that. And I figured once I had it figured out, I would just carry that back in, which I did. But that separate program kind of started growing on its own, and I didn't have a goal in mind. I just would have an idea and say, I wonder if I can have them wiggle, or I wonder if I can have them make sounds. You know, whatever it was I had the idea for, I would see if I could implement it. And if it worked, I would keep it. And if it didn't, I would just delete it. So it just evolved in this sort of random experimental way. And it is what it is. Yeah. It's cool. I enjoyed the pretty pictures that I made. I just didn't understand what I was doing. I was just moving.
That's all it is, right? Yeah, that's pretty much it. But the music it actually makes, I took the music engine and brought that into Star Explorers and manipulated it and changed it so it's a little more structured in Star Explorers. But I took a lot of those songs that it made and I brought those just as background music into Paradox Vector. So the music you hear in Paradox Vector was all procedurally generated by Anomalies. So
that's so cool.
I don't know if that helps, but yeah, that's what it is.
The response that I got from friends was like, this music is so like Minecraft. It's so like peaceful and just it's, you know, in the cold darkness of, you know, H.P. Lovecraft's idea of outer space. It was very nurturing, and it didn't make me feel quite so cold. So
some of the
even
later
though you were shouting, "Oh, I'm so cold."
Yeah.
Really, I really got to get back to the ship. It's much too cold.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. Thank you.
I appreciate you, brother. As Paradox Vector continues to evolve, I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to you taking your hiatus and exploring other artistic endeavors. And when you do return to video games at some point, I look forward to that too. And we'll talk again for sure. You can come back anytime you want. Doesn't even have to be about video games. We'll just have you on the show. And if people don't like it, they can kiss my ass. How's that sound?
Well, thank you so much for having me on. This has been really enjoyable.
Thank you so much to MK Schmidt for joining us on the show this week. It was fantastic getting to know him, and I look forward to spending more time together in the future. Thank you again, as always, to our supporters on Patreon. So Paul Moose Dots, Zach Alexander, Brad, Red Eyes, Anthony, Robert, Jack, Brandy, Fred. You are all amazing and greatly appreciated, and we couldn't do what we do without you. So much love. If you would like to be part of that list, all you got to do is head over to inthekeep.com and then click on our support tab. There you'll find links to our Patreon, to our donation links, and also to our affiliate links. And so go ahead and check those out. We got Amazon affiliation. You can do your shopping through Amazon if you were going to do that anyway. You don't have to, but if you want to, or if you're gonna, make sure you shop through our link, and that way your money doesn't all go to Jeff Bezos. Some of it comes back to the drowned god Katala. Maybe you're thinking about starting your own podcast. Recently we did the thing with Jamie from Doom's Dead, featured his podcast. He's also known as Hate Daddy. Really good interview with Russ King. But I spent a lot of time answering his questions on how do you start a podcast? And one of the biggest things I said was you got to do business with Buzzsprout. They're a fantastic place for you to manage and distribute your show. So you can get it on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, all that kind of shit, very easily for a very nominal fee. If you sign up through our link, it will be helping out the Keep. We'll get a little kickback off that too. And lastly, if you are a big fat son bitch who just can't make yourself get up out of that chair and go to the fucking grocery store, I'm just kidding. But if you're don't want to go out in times like this, or maybe you're elderly and you don't want to expose yourself, we get it. Instacart will have your groceries there in as little as an hour. So if you go through our link again on the support tab, click on that Instacart bad boy right there, and take yourself to their site, sign up, and bada bang, bada boom, you got yourself groceries delivered to the comfort of your own home. Lastly, as I mentioned before, head over to zensports.com, download their app, and when you do, make sure you use the promo code ITKPOD. This will help out with the Pigeon Classic charity event, but also it will help to keep out, in the future as partners with really amazing people doing really cool shit. So, without any further ado, I bid thee farewell. Have a fantastic week. Go give somebody a hug. It'll make you feel better. I promise. Spread the love. I love you. The drowned god Katala loves you. Till next time, stay in the keep.